Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we've got another cracking 10 for you. This time it's the biggest meltdowns the game has ever seen. Hold tight. 10. Man United, 1971-72. If there's one word we don't associate with Man United, it's choking. But in 1971, the club was facing a new challenge. Having put English football on the map in the 1960s with their magical European Cup triumph, they had since lost iconic manager Matt Busby, and new coach Frank O'Farrell faced competition for the title from Leeds and Brian Clough's Derby. United still had 3 Ballon d'Or winners in Charlton, Best and Denis Law, and on Christmas Day they were top of what was then called the First Division, with Derby their nearest challengers. The club had lost only twice and looked set for a first title in 5 years, but after the holidays they went 9 games without a win and lost 7 in a row. In the end, United finished 8th, and Derby pipped Leeds to the Championship, establishing Clough as one of the best managers in the country. The Red Devils, however, would suffer relegation 2 years later. It was their worst capitulation until 1998, when Fergie's side surrendered an 11-point lead to give Arsenal the title in Wenger's first full season in England. 9. William Gallas. Nobody personifies Arsenal's failures between 2004 and 2014 quite like William Gallas. The Frenchman joined the Gunners from Chelsea as part of the Ashley Cole deal and was unexpectedly made captain after just a year at the club in 2007 over the more obvious candidate Gilberto Silva. But his first season as skipper started well. Arsenal spent 5 months on top of the league between September and March, at one time sitting 5 points clear of the competition. But at the end of February, the warning signs became clear. A home game against Birmingham had unsettled Wenger's side, with Eduardo having his leg broken by Martin Taylor, and in the dying moments with Arsenal 2-1 up, Clichy gave away a penalty. Rather than take up a position at the edge of the area, Gallas bizarrely walked away into the Birmingham half, where he watched his opponents equalise. After the match finished 2-2, Gallas argued with fans before sitting down on the field and refusing to get up. In the end, Wenger himself had to remove the defender, and Arsenal went 4 games without a win, dropping to 3rd, where they finished the campaign. 8. Alan Pardew. Alan Pardew may be a middling Premier League manager, but to many, the guy is an elite d***. In his 20 years as coach, Pards has won promotion with Reading and West Ham, as well as taking the Irons and Crystal Palace to FA Cup finals, but the Englishman has become better known for his sideline antics. In 2006, Pardew got into a spat with Arsene Wenger after he criticised the coach for fielding no English players in a Champions League game against Real Madrid. When Wenger called the Englishman xenophobic in response, Pardew argued that he couldn't hate foreigners as he was married to a Swedish woman. Nearly 10 years later, it was Wenger's Chilean doppelganger Manuel Pellegrini who got both barrels, with Pardew calling him a f***ing old c*** during a match between Newcastle and Man City. But his greatest moment came just 2 months later. As the Magpies played Hull, David Myler pushed past Pardew on the sideline to retrieve the ball for a throw. Completely outraged by this fairly normal action, Pardinho nutted Myler and was sent to the stands and handed a £160,000 fine. 7. John Sitton. But if you think Alan Pardew is out of control, wait until you hear about absolute madman John Sitton. The Englishman was made Leyton Orient manager in 1994, having played for the club as a defender, as well as Chelsea and Millwall, and he kept the team in the 2nd tier, earning another season at the helm. Orient had financial difficulties, and Sitton was paid the salary of a youth coach while doing the work of 6 staff members and managing a squad which had been cut in half to save money. However, somebody at the club decided to allow a film crew behind the scenes during their campaign, and Sitton became a star overnight. During half-time of one match, with the club 1-0 down to Blackpool, the cameras caught the boss firing senior defender Terry Howard in the dressing room before offering to fight 2 others, telling them, "You can pair up if you like, and you can f***ing pick someone else to help you, and you can bring your f***ing dinner, because by the time I've finished with you, you'll f***ing need it." Wow. They lost the match and won just one of their next 15, resulting in Sitton's sacking and Orient's relegation. Afterwards, his career became even more unpredictable, as he worked as a scout for Man City, where he spotted Frank Lampard and Tim Cahill, became a taxi driver, and eventually returned to Orient as coach in 2006. He got 3 wins and a draw in 4 matches in charge before quitting after a disagreement with the owner. 6. Hearts 1986. The last team outside Rangers and Celtic to win the Scottish League was Aberdeen in 1985, when they were managed by Alex Ferguson. But Hearts almost beat out the old firm a year later, when when they went on an incredible 27-game unbeaten run, giving them hope of lifting just their 5th ever title and their first since 1960. That streak saw Hearts go into the last day of the season on 50 points, 2 ahead of Celtic and only needing a draw to guarantee them a title, as in those days teams only got 2 points for a win. Celtic meanwhile needed to beat St Mirren, see Hearts lose to Dundee and make up some ground in goal difference, with the Midlothian side on plus 28 while the boys had just plus 25. Celtic did all they could, going 4-0 up at half-time while Hearts were still drawing 0-0, meaning despite the Hoops' irresistible performance, they would still end the season empty-handed. They added a 5th in the second half, but that wasn't going to be good enough until Dundee brought on young forward Albert Kidd. Kidd hadn't scored all season, but with the UEFA Cup place up for grabs, Dundee made one last throw of the dice and were rewarded with a brace from the sub. Hearts lost 2-0 and finished behind Celtic on goal difference and went on to suffer a 3-0 battering in the Scottish Cup final to Aberdeen. If you're enjoying this 10, why not check out Sunday Vibes, where we answer all of your questions. Click on the eye up there, and while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe down there. 5. Milan 0, Deportivo 4. Real Madrid became the first club to retain the Champions League in 2017, but Milan came close to the feat in 2004. The Rossoneri had beaten Juventus on penalties the previous year and would lose in the final the year after, with the dominant side featuring Kaká, Seedorf and Maldini under the stewardship of Carlo Ancelotti. Milan won their group and sailed through a round of 16 clash with Sparta Prague, setting up a quarter-final with Deportivo La Coruña, then one of Spain's best sides, above Barcelona. But despite their pedigree, the Turcos suffered a 4-1 demolition in the first leg at the San Siro, with Kaká grabbing a brace and Pirlo and Shevchenko netting the others. The return fixture was expected to be a formality, but Depor had other ideas. An early goal from Pandiani gave the Spaniards confidence, and they were 3-0 up at half-time, with the defence of Cafu, Maldini and Nesta looking utterly outclassed. A 4th was added with 15 minutes left, and Milan fans watched their side exit the competition in disbelief. If they had won, they would have faced eventual champions Porto in the semi and been clear favourites to lift the biggest trophy in club football. 4. Liverpool 2013-14. Everyone remembers Liverpool's bitter 2-0 loss at Anfield back in 2014, when Steven Gerrard slipped and handed Chelsea the win and City the title. But that's not really the whole story. After the game, the Reds were still level with City on points, and though they had a deficit in goal difference, they faced Crystal Palace and Newcastle in the last 2 games, with both sides having nothing to play for. So, on the penultimate match day, Liverpool went to Selhurst Park hoping for a big win to keep up the pressure on the citizens, and they delivered. Joe Allen, Daniel Sturridge and Luis Suarez all scored, and with less than a quarter of an hour to go, Brendan Rodgers' side looked certain to add to their 3-goal lead. But then Damien Delaney popped up, smashing a deflected shot past Mignolet, and 2 minutes later, Dwight Gale made it 3-2. Then, with 120 seconds left on the clock, Gale bagged a second, ending Liverpool's title hopes for good. After the whistle went, Steven Gerrard pushed the cameras away from a weeping Luis Suarez, and the club's 24-year run without a championship continued. 3. Joe Kinnear. A maverick whose first coaching job came with the Indian national team, former Irish international Joe Kinnear became Newcastle boss in 2008, after 4 years out of management. Famously abrasive, Kinnear celebrated his appointment by picking a fight with the media in his first press conference, opening by calling Simon Bird, a Daily Mirror journalist, a c***. In the space of a few minutes, Kinnear swore 52 times at the assembled reporters, and though a horrified Newcastle press officer tried to get the interview off the record, Kinnear claimed he was happy for his comments to go out unedited. Before long, he refused to speak to the press altogether, delegating to coach Chris Sitton, and he won just 4 of his 18 games in charge, before his career at St James's Park was ended prematurely by a heart bypass operation. However, 4 years later, Kinnear came back, this time as director of football. In an interview with TalkSport, he claimed he'd won the Manager of the Year award 3 times when he'd actually won it once, that he'd bought Tim Krul, who was actually brought in by Graham Souness, and that he'd signed up John Hartson on a free when the Welshman had cost £7.5 million. He also got multiple player names wrong, memorably calling Johan Cabaye Johan Kebab and Shola Amiobi Amabogi. Really? This time he lasted 8 months, failing to make a single permanent signing in 2 transfer windows. 2. Hungary 2, West Germany 3. The 1954 World Cup final looked a foregone conclusion. The golden team of Hungary, also known as the mighty Magyars, faced West Germany, then just 5 years old and eager to establish themselves on the global stage. But the two sides had already met in the group stage 14 days earlier, with the Magyars riding out 8-3 winners. Hungary had scored 25 goals in 4 games, can you believe it, on their way to the showpiece match, but Germany had come into form too, battering Turkey 7-2 before dispatching a much-fancied Austria side 6-1 in the semi. And the final got off to a frantic start, with Cibor and Puskás netting in the first 8 minutes. Germany must have feared another thrashing, but 2 minutes later they scored themselves, and by 20 minutes the score was deadlocked again, thanks to Helmut Rahn. Hungary were dominant, racking up 26 shots and an incredible 16 on target, but German keeper Turek kept his team in the match. And with 5 minutes left, Rahn dribbled into the box before lashing in a third and giving Germany their first World Cup. Afterwards, thousands of Hungarians protested in Budapest, with team keeper Grosics even claiming he felt the loss contributed to the political uprising of 1956, while in Germany, the game became known as the Miracle of Bern. 1. Real Madrid 2003-04. A former Man United assistant manager, Carlos Queiroz made the huge step up to Real Madrid coach in 2003, taking over from Vicente del Bosque. Los Blancos had won the league the previous season and the Champions League the year before that, and Queiroz looked set to take the most expensive squad ever assembled to glory again. After 26 games, Real were 8 points clear of Valencia in second, while Barca languished in fourth, 13 points off the pace. Queiroz was targeting the first treble in the club's history, but the Copa del Rey was set to derail their whole campaign. A 3-2 loss to Zaragoza saw their form fall apart on all fronts, with a Champions League exit to Monaco in the quarter-finals following very quickly. But La Liga saw the greatest humiliation. Real won just 3 of their last 12 matches and lost 7, including 5 defeats on the bounce to finish the campaign. Their tally of 11 points from the last 36 saw them drop all the way down to 4th, below Rafa Benitez Valencia, Barcelona and Deportivo, and they would get through 5 coaches over the next 3 years before winning the league again. So thanks once again for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed this, why not click on screen right now for another one of our fantastic videos. And as always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe.